Hello, welcome to Fireside Chat. My name is Magla Pillay, and today we will be taking up the subject of having a spiritual relationship with your body. We found that the subject is of interest to all because most people do not have a spiritual relationship with their body. There are a lot of you who do not like what you see in the mirror, and there is even a larger number that actually engage in some form of harming the body or someone else's body. This series aims to look at the core of spirituality. We ask you to look at what your own relationship with God is and whether there is a balance in your internal and external world. We have in the studio with us Sister Denise, a yogi with 4 decades of spiritual experience, who is willing to share her wisdom with us. Sister Denise, very, very warm welcome.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for joining us. This topic is a very curious one because when one goes about one's daily life, you do not actually revisit your relationship with your body as a rule. Why is this an important aspect from a spiritual perspective?
I think that people are very concerned about their bodies. They look in the mirror. They look at themselves as they walk down the street in the shop windows. They're not actually looking at what's in the shop window, they're looking at their own reflection, because people tend to compare themselves favorably or unfavorably with everybody else, because there is, I suppose we could call it an epidemic, the looking good syndrome. And because people think I am a body, then if I don't look good, then it means I am not good enough, I'm not acceptable, someone can criticize me, So it's really this identification with the body that's such a problem. And what you want is, or what most people want, is to be attractive. People look very much at their face, and of course there's all these fashion magazines, and you have to be, tall, thin, tan, blonde, and 25 years old, which of course only lasts for 1 year at best. And you compare yourself with something which is kind of impossible to achieve. Most models are suffering from anorexia or some problem because of being obliged to keep their weight to a certain point, which is really unhealthy. Then you look at your nose, you want a nose job. Then there's Botox for your cheeks, your lips, your eyelids, your other parts of the body. And there are so many situations where there are botched jobs, and then you have to redo it, and it gets worse and worse and worse. So a spiritual relationship with your body involves 2 things. One of them is to accept yourself as you are, because the body you get is anyway a product of your karma. And secondly, you have to be a trustee of it. So accepting your body the way it is actually corresponds to who you are, the way you are, because it's such a close connection with your karma, which is the expression of you. And being a trustee of your body means that you don't really have the right to not look after it properly. A trustee means who is ultimately the owner of your body. You are the owner of it temporarily, but why life is sacred, why your body is actually something that you are entrusted with, is because you can say it's a gift from God, or it's owned by God, and you have to treat it according to the recommendations of God. That means make sure you get sleep, proper food, exercise, and that you look after your health needs. Of course, there are going to be situations where there are obstacles in that, but you still have to do your best as a trustee.
Mr. Denise, it's a very common phenomena to see people who have little or no regard for their bodies, where they engage in various forms of physical abuse, internal and external. What is behind that? It's almost a, I get the impression that it's almost a form of flagellation.
Well, you know, there are a number of reasons why a person would dislike their body, and part of it is the messages they get from outside, where someone will tell them, you are too fat, too thin, too dark, too tall, too short, too something, you know. Whatever it is, it's not okay, because okay is something more or less unattainable. And the person will take that as their identity being inadequate. And sometimes the messages that people will get from others contains a lot of load, if you know what I mean, that somebody will really say, you know, yuck, you know, you are horrible, you are a worm, you are a toad, you are some such thing like that. And especially when it happens at a young age, where one is much more defenseless, if not completely defenseless, it goes right in and it stays there, and you're always having to compensate for this idea that you're never going to be okay. No matter what you do, it's never enough, it's never good enough.
Mr. Denise, race. It's so deep-seated to identify with your skin color. And the world is so filled with problems and wars, where people have made the mistake of identifying with their own skin color and discriminating against others whose skin tone is different, whose bodily features are different. How does spirituality offer an answer for this malady?
It's a very deep-seated malady, because it goes back to the different scriptures, which is where it all started off from. Because when the soul is pure, it is illuminated, it is bright, it is light. And when the soul loses that purity and loses light, then the soul becomes dark. And people have said light and dark, referring to the soul, but they've said it in terms of reference to the body. So then light is beautiful, light is fair, light is good, and dark is bad, dark is ugly, etc. And people have included that in the cultures. It's totally global. And then some people will try to turn it around so that they say, well, you know, my color is the best color, anybody else's color is not okay. And it's not just color, but also facial features and things like this. And all of it is a problem because of thinking that a person is a body. Once you start thinking a person is a soul, then still there are people who will say, okay, well, if you're a bright soul, then you'll have a bright body. But, you know, you can have someone with a beautiful body and an ugly soul. You can have people with very distorted bodies, but a very beautiful mind inside. And we have this treated in films and the arts on many occasions. So the thing is, what are the eyes that we're using to look at the person? Are we just stopping on the surface of the body, or are we really seeing the person who is the being within?
Okay. Mr. Denise, dark-skinned people especially have a tendency to have absorbed the negative image of themselves based on their skin color, and have perpetuated that, not only themselves but generation after generation. How do you pull yourself out of that in a way that's actually effective? In other words, where you don't dislike yourself because you might be darker than somebody who's, for example, your skin color.
I think it's a very difficult thing to do, because your body is with you all the time, and you know, the legacy of racism is for centuries, and it's global. So there's a lot of it has been internalized, and it's connected with very heavy acts, historical events, wars, genocide, abuse of entire communities has been going on, and all of it is rooted in actually the attitudes that people have developed, and base those in their scriptures or in their traditions, you see. So to undo a tradition is a huge piece of work. So I think what one has to do is learn to see the soul. And this is what we learn in Raj Yoga. And I mean, there are some people who grow up racist, and there are other people who grow up non-racist. And it's easier for the non-racist people to switch to a use of the eyes where you just look right through the body and see the soul, because that's how you're raised anyway. We also talk about the third eye, and the third eye can see the invisible to the naked eye. So it really depends on where you orient your attention, you know. How do you consider another person? Are you considering just their bodily features? The more materialistic you are, the more it is like that. But if you're interested in a beautiful soul, a beautiful person, a person who is virtuous, who is kind, who is, you know, clean and straight, honest and trustworthy, loyal, all of these things, nothing to do with skin color or height or width or any of that stuff.
Sister Denise, in addition to being you know, ad idem or identifying with one's race, another very common phenomena, and there's scarcely a person on the planet who's not like this, people identify with their sexuality.
Yes.
You'll say, this is John, he's gay. That is Magdalene, she's straight, but she hangs out with gay people. You have people who, it's so deep to identify with one's sexual orientation, and you don't say, you know, I have a gay orientation. You say, I am gay, I am straight. It has become identity. And tell me, what does that do to a person? The reason I'm asking you this is because so much of sorrow is taken from one's sexual identity.
This is again coming back to the scriptures, because most religions say that if you are not heterosexual, you are a mistake, you are wrong. Some people, they destroy those who are not heterosexual, and you have transvestites, you have all sorts of combinations. And when a person is looking at their sexuality, they're looking at something that they can't do anything about, in the sense that they can't not have that. And this is why they say, I am that, you know. But again, I am that because it's part of the body, it's part of the bodily orientation, as well as a spiritual or a soul orientation. Because if you say, okay, my orientation is towards people of the same sex or people of the opposite sex, that's mental, not physical. It's a mental orientation to the physical, you see. And the prevailing social attitudes are absolutely concerned about morality, which is all to do with following certain traditions, and a lot of that means to be extremely conservative. And you know, one of the problems that's happening at this time, where there's a lot of antagonistic behavior towards women, is the reason given is they have to be conservative. If they're not conservative, we will harm them, destroy them, kill them, maim them. And so it is, it's an attitude which is part of fanaticism, and all very rooted in this identification with morality, conventional morality. And so what has to happen is we need to separate conventional morality from spiritual values, you can say, or spiritual virtues, spiritual reality, and to make it clear that conventional morality is part of materialism, part of identification with matter, and this people do not agree with, or they do not think it's like that. So we have to clarify that. And then on the other hand, where you have people who want to have freedom of expression, who want to be liberal, be free, be without constraints, why is that a phenomenon? Is actually as partly a reaction to and response to the invasiveness and the tyranny of the group of people who impose conservatism on people. One of the very deep urges within a human being is the urge for freedom. And in fact, the aim of spiritual practice is known as liberty, liberation, freedom. In Hindi they speak of mukti. Mukti means freedom. And in that it is freedom from the constraints of the material world imposed upon the person, the soul, by patriarchal, materialistic-minded, body-conscious people. Who think that that is spirituality.
Wait, hold on. That's quite a loaded sentence. Say that again. Those adjectives, say that again.
Patriarchal, materialist, body conscious.
Okay.
You see.
Okay.
I am a body. And then in the hierarchy of bodies, white, male, tall, athletic, etc., is, up on the top. And then they make the hierarchy to black female on the bottom. And so, this is presented to the world, and it's the tradition. And what spirituality is saying is there's something wrong with your traditions, because they are not based in spirituality, which you claim they are. They're based in materialism. And materialism is not coming from the, you can say, the origins of human civilization, but materialism is a form of the opposite of evolution. This is another point of contention. People have this belief that we start off primitive and we're becoming more and more civilized, but there's a very good case for looking at it in the opposite direction, that there was an ancient time when everyone was highly spiritual, and that has been lost, and there's been a decline in the quality of the spirit of humanity ever since.
Maybe it should be called devolution.
You could say devolution.
Okay. So, Sister Denise, it's also quite astounding how people equate who someone is with what they appear to be on the outside. It's almost as if there is no distinction between one's physical attributes and one's personality. The expression, never judge a book by its cover, almost all of us are guilty of doing that. Almost all of that.
Well, it's because people know very well that if I want you to look at me a certain way, I have to dress that way, you see. And in traditional societies or in olden times, you would dress according to your caste, your social rank, your profession, or your artisan. I mean, if you see in India, in Rajasthan, where we are, the castes have their uniform, and they do not move from that for centuries and centuries, and their uniforms are very beautiful, very colourful, but they say everything about a person's rank and so on. So you see, the message is you are something, you dress that way, you look that way, you behave that way, you marry that way, you run your household that way, you earn your living that way, and there is no possibility of movement.
Sister Denise, let's go through all of this one by one. You're saying that from a spiritual perspective, a person is not their physical body.
Right.
Okay? So you're not your race, and you're not your sexuality. You're not your caste. What else are you not that people assume you are?
You're not your gender.
You're not your gender.
You're not your nationality. You're not your language group.
Okay, what your past?
You're not your past. You're not your even your role that you play.
You mean your job, your vocation?
Your vocation,
be it
your
housewife
social,
or a CEO. You're not that either.
No.
Okay. Now that is shocking, because for almost everybody, if you take all of that away, most people assume that you're left with nothing. But what you are saying is, once you remove all of that, then you are left with the truth.
Well, you're left with the reality that this is what you are.
And what is that? What is left if you strip away all of those various attributes that mankind considers to make you and human?
Well, this is what you have to do in a spiritual practice. You begin the process of stripping away. I'm not my job. I'm not my body. I'm not my gender, you know. And so whenever you remove one of those things in your mind, in your thinking, then you have to think about it.
As you're speaking, I'm thinking of Michelangelo carving out David, except you're Michelangelo and you're also David, and you got a chip.
You chip all these things away, and of course what's left inside that piece of marble is something beautiful, which is enduring, and this is really the soul.
Okay.
So I'm a soul, and what is inside the soul is all of the things which are given to the soul by God, you see, which are all beautiful things. Your eternity, your virtues, your powers, all of this. And then as time and loss of awareness takes place, you acquire so many things that are false, and then you identify with all that falsehood, and this is called false consciousness. So you have to strip away the masks of falseness until you end up with that pure essence that is yourself.
Sister Denise, I want to ask you something obvious. You say you're not the body. When I do this, I feel it. How can you feel something that you're not? What am I feeling when I do this? Aren't I feeling me?
No, you're feeling your body, because if you touch your body, you're getting a sense perception, you see. Now, in order for you, the soul, to feel your own soul, you have to turn the energy of your mind back upon itself, which it's not used to doing. You see, because normally your mind is caught in your sense perceptions and you are externally oriented.
Okay, I once heard you use the expression internalized mind and externalized mind. Could you tell us what you meant by that in this context?
Well, in this context, the externalized mind is that your mind is aware of material reality via your sense perceptions, of which touch is a very important one. You touch yourself, you pinch yourself, you will experience pain, which is a message sent to your brain through your nerves, which say, you know, if you do this to this body, there's going to be damage. So pain is the messenger that says, don't do this, you know. It's about how you look after your body, because the body is, quite fragile. It needs sustenance, food, clothing, warmth, all of these various things in order to function well. And when you feel uncomfortable, it's a signal that you have to do something about it. So it's a signal from your body to your soul about taking care of your body, which is important. But you cannot feel yourself using your sense perceptions, because yourself is not material. And so how do you feel yourself? You have to turn the energy of your mind upon itself, because your mind is an instrument of your being. It's not part of your body or your brain. So then you say, okay, now how do I do this? You're given some information like you are not your body, and then you say, well, in that case, what am I? So if you were told, okay, well, you're a soul, the body is an object, but the soul is not an object. But our language is created in body consciousness, where there is no vocabulary for the self as something that's not an object, or very little. We don't have pronouns for a self. We have either a he or a she for the body with male arrangements or with female arrangements, and then an it, which doesn't involve sexual reproduction. But yet a male body, a female body, and a chair are all equally physical objects. The difference is that the human body is animated by the human spirit. And what we need to do is to make contact with this animating force and know that this is me and this body is a possession.
So, Sister Denise, the practice of a spiritual identity must be very deep to offset what has now become a habituated way of being, mustn't it?
Well, it is, and it takes a long time, and not everybody can do it to the fullest extent. It's something quite rare, something quite elevated and special, and there is a lot of, you can say, merit in achieving that. So a person who does that would be considered very great among people. But the world that we are in today doesn't give importance to that. It gives importance to achievements in the realm of materialism. And so we issue a challenge and say, really, is that what makes a person great? How about this? What do you think of this? And present it. If a person is really in their spiritual strength, power, integrity, and so on, is that not greater than somebody who is a millionaire, but then, all these other maybe negative attributes going with that?
Okay. Sister Denise, thank you so much for a fresh and enlightening perspective on how to view our own physical bodies. Thank you. So those of you who are at home watching today's episode, I hope that you were able to find something in this that was of value to you. This is a very new concept. Most people are aware of the soul, and Sister Denise is asking you to make the paradigm shift from I have a soul to I am a soul living in a physical body. And like you heard, the benefits of seeing yourself this way is manifold, and the danger of not doing it is also manifold. And the message that I received is that if you stay in what Sister Denise calls body consciousness, eventually you end up paying a very heavy price for it, because it is a false identity. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Sister Denise, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you, and goodbye.